Hell of a Summer took a hell of a long time to finally get released. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my coverage of the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, today I'm going to be talking about the 2023 slasher comedy, Hell of a Summer, which will finally be released in theaters on April 4th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Hell of a Summer stars Fred Hechinger, Abby Quinn, and Finn Wolfhard, and was co-directed by Finn Wolfhard and Billy Bryk. It tells the story of a group of summer camp counselors who find themselves trapped with a masked killer on the loose. Originality seems to increasingly be one of the main hot-button topics of film discussion these days. We currently live in a cinematic world that's seemingly dominated by franchises. A large percentage of theatrically released films each year are sequels or prequels, remakes or reboots, and if they aren't connected to an existing movie, many of them are still based on some IP that exists outside of the movie world. A book, a video game, a TV show. Now, obviously, there are plenty of other original films out there too, but I can understand people's frustrations at the perceived sameness of movies when they're staring at a theater marquee that's 80% sequels and remakes. But this begs the question, does this frustration extend to homages as well? Hell of a Summer is not part of an existing franchise, but you could easily understand if someone were to mistake it for the latest Friday the 13th or Scream sequel. Heavily inspired by 80s summer camp slashers, this is a horror comedy that sends up the slasher genre without ever trying to truly tear it down. Maybe that's because the essence of so many of its predecessors are woven right into the very fabric of this film. That said, it's certainly not the most original film you'll see this year, which might be part of the reason it took so long to get a proper release. I mean, it's been more than a year and a half since I saw this at TIFF. Given how steeped in genre tropes and traditions this film is, you've likely seen this basic story setup before, probably a dozen times. Here in this film, we've got a group of teenage camp counselors prepping the summer camp for the arrival of the kids, only to find themselves being picked off one by a masked killer. Unlike many 80s slashers, this film takes a more blatantly comedic route, updating things to account for modern technology and decidedly Gen Z sensibilities. In addition to the humor, Hell of a Summer also provides a bit more characterization to its cast of counselors. But just a bit. Fred Hechinger is the standout here as the 24-year-old head counselor, Jason. Yep, they really named him Jason. He's an earnest and dorky character who truly loves being at camp, despite everybody telling him to move on with his life. Jason is our main protagonist, leading a group of sarcastic teenage counselors, each with their own singular personality trait, as one would expect from a summer camp slasher. There are a few 80s holdover personalities, but this is another element where we've seen some updating. They still all somehow feel expected, but they're admittedly a funny conglomeration of characters and personality types that comedically mesh together surprisingly well. Hell of a Summer is a fun and enjoyable watch. But, much like the 24-year-old Jason returning to Camp Pineway for his 6th year as counselor, this film is a bit unambitious. The individual story that's crafted here does mostly feel like its own thing, but if you're even somewhat familiar with the classic slasher playbook, there won't be very many plot surprises for you. This movie proceeds through the expected homage fest, hitting every genre trope along the way. It injects humor into the story, lightly satirizing the genre at times and just being entertaining at others, but it doesn't push the envelope, instead staying within the well-worn bounds of its genre predecessors. Very standard slasher cinematography and dim lighting, PG-13 cutaway kills despite being an R-rated film, no unique or particularly unexpected twists. I do think this type of overfamiliarity will be a very disappointing thing for a subset of people, but personally speaking, I don't mind the derivative homage quality on display here. It makes for a comfortable and mentally cozy viewing experience, because it delivers a new entry of something we already know so well. After all, this movie is really just the result of a pair of 20-year-olds making their own updated and comedic version of an 80s slasher. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is Fred Hechinger. Despite almost all of the other elements of this film being pulled directly from past slashers, this film mixes things up a bit by giving us a sympathetic protagonist to root for, at least when it's not pointing the killer finger at everybody. Hechinger plays Jason with a degree of innocent sweetness that's rare for the genre, and almost non-existent with male slasher leads. If you're familiar with his performance in Thelma, you'll know the type of soft-spoken personality to expect from him here, too. No June Squibb, unfortunately, but Hechinger's still really solid here, providing a nice balance to this cast of characters. The second pro has gotta be the humor. Comedy is always subjective, and not every joke and gag here landed for me, but speaking overall, I really enjoyed the horror comedy angle that this slasher takes. It's self-aware without ever becoming meta. It's kind of a difficult to describe mix, really. It's almost satirical, it's almost a parody at times, but it never gets to the point where it's actually making fun of itself, or making fun of the slasher genre for that matter. It's more of a comedic homage that highlights the genre tropes and traditions in a knowing, lighthearted way, while simultaneously using them to tell its story in a very emulative way. On the con side, the biggest issue is how unambitious this film is. I think a lot of people will equate lack of ambition with derivativeness, but I don't think it's that simple. The obvious influences and derivative nature of the story certainly add to a sense of familiarity, but that was intentional here, and not the issue. The problem comes from what's done with those familiar pieces. Here, they're reassembled in exactly the way you'd expect them to be. That in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, since we are talking about a movie that's trying to be a genre homage, but since it doesn't expand upon those familiar elements or do anything particularly unique with them, the film ends up being more of an entertaining emulation of the genre rather than a clever revitalization of it. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Hell of a Summer or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Hell of a Summer 3.5 out of 5 paws, though it's kind of on the edge between 3 and 3.5 for me. It's a fairly enjoyable Gen Z update on the classic summer camp slasher film. The plot's extremely familiar, pulling inspiration from a dozen of its genre predecessors, but with Fred Hechinger's endearing performance and the added humor and self-awareness, this slasher comedy manages to carve out a nice spot for itself. I would recommend Hell of a Summer to fans of classic 80s slashers who want a dose of self-aware humor to go with their camp counselor kebabs. This is a movie that draws very heavily upon its influences, so if you're somebody who often takes issue with movies being derivative of something else, then you're gonna want to give this film an extra wide berth. But if you're just looking for a fun horror comedy slasher homage, then this will be a good summer night with friends kind of movie. If you liked Hell of a Summer, I would recommend Cry Wolf. Rather than camp counselors, it focuses on a group of teens at a boarding school whose not-so-friendly game turns deadly, causing panic and pointed fingers in all directions. At the time of its release in 2005, it was sort of that era's modern update to the slasher genre. If you want something a bit more classic slasher, you've got to check out Friday the 13th. The first of the summer camp slasher subgenre, this film, and its numerous sequels, are among the biggest influences on Hell of a Summer, focusing on a group of camp counselors who are being systematically picked off by a mysterious killer. And if you liked the self-awareness and comedic elements here, you'll want to watch Scream. This film cleverly deconstructs the slasher genre, while still delivering an entertaining and twisty slasher story in its own right. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Hell of a Summer? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite summer camp slasher? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.